All right. Thank you for stopping by to watch the video. If you're watching it to prepare for your STAR test, I'm going to try to walk you through every little piece of the Constitution. I'm going to try to go fast because there is a lot to cover here, and I don't want this to be a 20-minute long video, but I want to make sure everything's covered well, and I want to make sure you understand it. So rewind if you need to, pull out your review packet if you want to follow along with me, and we're going to power through the Constitution. Okay, so we fight this war, and we've covered that during the American Revolution video. But we fight the war, and the type of government that is created, if you will, is called the Articles of Confederation. And the Articles of Confederation gave the federal government hardly any power whatsoever, and it gave the states every bit of the power. And it makes complete sense that they did this because they were trying to avoid repeating having a king. They just broke away from King George III. They didn't want that same situation to develop again, so they were doing everything they could to limit government's power and give all the power to the states. And well, in doing that, though, they didn't quite get the balance right. And because they didn't get the balance right, they weren't able to raise taxes. You had a different type of money in each state because each state was basically acting like its own little country. There was no court system to take care of any disagreements, to take care of any problems. There was no executive branch to enforce any of the laws that the federal government might have made. And so what we have is a man named Daniel Shea, and he's not incredibly important to remember, but his story does give you a reason as to why the colonists felt they needed to fix the Articles of Confederation. Daniel Shea was a veteran of the American Revolution. He got to the end of the war, he survived, and there was no money to pay him for his years of service. Why was there no money to pay him? Well, the Articles of Confederation really didn't allow the federal government to raise money. And because they couldn't raise money, they didn't have any money to pay their soldiers once the war was over. So he was very upset about that, and rightfully so he was upset about it, but also because of the Articles of Confederation, there was no court system. And so there was no way he could sue anybody. There was no way a judge could step in and kind of help solve the problem. And so because of that the absence of that court system, Daniel Shea basically takes up arms, and he's like, you know what, we just had one revolution, I'll have another revolution until I get my money. And that's what he did. Now, his rebellion was squashed. He ended up going to jail. They were going to hang him, but the president pardoned him. But it really showed the colonists that, okay, this Articles of Confederation, we like why we did it, but it's not working. And so before we can really get into the Constitution, which is obviously what replaced the Articles of Confederation, we have to understand an important question, and the question is, who makes the call? And I know I used this example in class. Let's say you have a child, and let's say you have the parents making a decision, and you have a teacher making a decision. Who gets the final say-so? All right, well, let's say the parents take away a child's phone, and let's say the teacher disagrees with that decision. Okay, really? Who makes the call, though? Does the parent get to make the call, or does the teacher make the call? And so this same type of scenario applies to government as well. Who has the most power? Do the parents have the most power, or does the teacher have the most power? Obviously, the parent does. But when we look at it in terms of a government, who has the most power? Does the state have the most power, or does the federal government have the most power? And that's where we start getting two divides. We start getting the anti-federalists, which are definitely saying that the state governments have the most power, and we have the federalists, and their position is that the federal government gets the most power. So depending on where you fall and depending on how you answer this question dictates how you view government. If you believe the states need more power, you would have been an anti-federalist. If you believe the federal government needed more power, you would have been a federalist. And really, the same question is still being debated back and forth today. How much power does the government have? How much power do I have? The question has never gone away, and we've constantly argued about it. All right, so we have the Anti-Federalists. And the Anti-Federalists were definitely for lots of states' rights. The state has the more powerful government. We have people, Patrick Henry, Sam Adams. We remember from the Revolution video that Patrick Henry and Sam Adams, they were very tight. They were very good friends. They fought together very much so. We have Thomas Jefferson. We have James Madison. All of these people are Anti-Federalist, and they were wanting to avoid having another king. And in their minds, the best way to avoid having another king is to basically give a president no power. If that president has no power, well, then he can't become a king because he has no power. All right. They wanted a weak national government, strong state government. They wanted a strict interpretation, basically saying, I'm not going to do any of this inferring stuff. If the Constitution says it, awesome. If it doesn't, I'm not going to read between the lines. I'm not going to make any inferences here. It either says it or it doesn't. And they were basically scared of a monarchy again. The other side of this is Alexander Hamilton, as we know, is going to be involved with the bank. We have John Adams, which I find this interesting. John Adams being cousins with Sam Adams, they both had very different views on how the government needed to come about. How did the government need to run, even though they were cousins? Federalists, like I already said, were a strong national government. They were a loose interpretation of the Constitution, basically saying, you know what, the Constitution may not say this, but I'm going to read between the lines here. I'm going to make an inference. I think it means this. And that's basically what Alexander Hamilton uses to form his bank. The bank is nowhere, the national bank is not mentioned in the Constitution. And so according to a strict interpretation, your answer to, is this legal? Can we have a national bank? Well, an anti-federalist would have said no. The Constitution strictly says nothing about it, therefore we don't have it. A federalist was more of a loose. A federalist said, you know what? And Alexander Hamilton said this, well, you know what? I think we can. This is a strict, loose interpretation. All right, so regardless of whether you are a Federalist or an Anti-Federalist, everyone knew we needed to fix the Articles of Confederation. And so they all gathered together at the Constitutional Convention. Sometimes you'll hear it called the Philadelphia Convention, but this took place in the year 1787. There's only 6 years you need to know. This is one of those 6 years. George Washington was the president of the convention. They trusted him from the American Revolution, and they trusted him to kind of keep the peace and to make sure this process of creating a new government runs correctly. Now, obviously, they didn't set out to create a new government. They wanted to fix the Articles, but once they started getting into it, they started digging into it and started trying to come up with solutions. They realized we can't save it. We have to scrap it. We have to do something brand new, and that's how we get the Constitution that we have today. All right, so we have a couple of things with this, though. You have two different views on how government needs to run, and so you're going to get different views and different ideas on how this new Constitution needs to look. We have James Madison, who, remember, he was an anti-federalist. He introduced the Virginia Plan, and the Virginia Plan created the 3 branches we know today. It created the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judiciary branch. Legislative creates the laws, executive enforces the laws, judiciary justifies the laws. And so you can remember that with the L and the L, E and the E, the J and the J. But why would we want 3 branches of government? Well, we have to know James Madison, he was an anti-federalist. Anti-federalists were afraid of a strong government. And so the idea here is, if we can take this power and split it between 3 different groups, well, no group is going to get that much power. And so he's basically trying to take all the power away from a president, quote-unquote, a king, quote-unquote, and dividing it up. And because I'm dividing the power up along these 3 branches, no branch is going to be very powerful. Because remember, James Madison, anti-federalist, wanted a very weak federal government. So this plan makes sense if you were an anti-federalist. All right, so another plan that was introduced was the New Jersey Plan, and the New Jersey Plan was based on everyone gets the same amount of votes. All right, whereas the Virginia Plan was a little bit more based on population. As far as representatives go, the New Jersey Plan was based on everyone is equal, and so we compromised. We created a 2 legislative house. Okay, so in the legislative branch, the legislature makes the laws, which they're afraid of how laws are going to be made. So let's spread the power across as many people as possible. If we spread the power out to as many people as possible, then we have a greater chance of not having an oppressive, abusive government. It creates the House of Representatives, which is based on population. There's your Virginia Plan. And it creates the Senate, which is based on equality. So the House of Representatives is the Virginia Plan based on population. Senate is based on equality, which is the New Jersey Plan. It's called the Great Compromise. Sometimes it's called the Connecticut Compromise as well. All right, so we get this Constitution put together, we create these 3 branches, we create the House of Representatives, we create the Senate. people were still not satisfied. People were still scared that this government didn't give enough rights to the people. People were still scared that this new constitution was going to turn into just another oppressive government. They were afraid they were going to get another king. And so they were wanting rights. They wanted an assurance. They wanted something written down in this constitution that guaranteed them their rights. Think rights, think John Locke, unalienable rights. And so it's eventually ratified, which means the states approve it. And most of the states approved it only under the condition that a Bill of Rights was added to it. And so the Anti-Federalists were wanting this more protection. They got their protection in the Bill of Rights. So I'm going to walk us through the 10 Bill of Rights really quickly. The First Amendment is the one we are most familiar with. The First Amendment is the freedom of speech, the freedom of press, religion, petition, the freedom to assemble together. It's for everyone. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if I agree or disagree. You have that right to say what you think you need to say. You have that right to practice the religion you want to practice, and you have the right to get together in relation to those. Second Amendment we also hear a lot about is the right to bear arms. This is where we get the gun laws. You hear Second Amendment in the news a ton right now. Is what did it really mean? Or it doesn't really mean this. It means this over here. People are confused. Basically, the Second Amendment means you have the right to protect yourself, and if that means to use a gun to protect yourself, then you use a gun to protect yourself and you protect your family. So that's the Second Amendment. The Third Amendment is the protection from the quartering of troops. Basically, this means that the Army, the United States Army, can never be housed in a private house. Notice a trend here. Okay, notice how all of these amendments are directly related to something that happened to the colonists during the years leading up to the Revolution. Third Amendment, why on earth would we have an amendment about keeping soldiers out of private houses? Oh, wait a minute, because King George put soldiers in people's houses. Interesting. Okay, why on earth would we have a Second Amendment where where our guns are protected? Oh, that's right. King George in Lexington and Concord was trying to take their guns from them. Interesting. Why on earth would we have a First Amendment that gives us the freedom of religion? Wait a minute, almost all of these colonies were born out of the desire to practice religion the way they wanted. So when you look at the history, all of these amendments make complete sense. Our Fourth Amendment is the protection from an unreasonable search and seizure. No one can just come into your house and look through it. No one can just come into your house and take your stuff unless a court approves that. Fifth Amendment, if you've ever heard the phrase, I plead the Fifth, it means you can never be forced to incriminate yourself. There will never be a situation where you are forced to admit your guilt, if you will, in a court of law. Okay, Sixth Amendment guarantees you that even if you do end up doing something wrong, we're not going to have a single person, we're not going to have a king-like person decide what happens to you. We're going to once again spread this power out to as many people as possible. We're going to have a jury. We're going to let your peers, we're going to let people, respected people in the community come in and decide your fate, if you will. Seventh Amendment is very similar. It talks about your jury. It basically says that if there's something involving property that's worth $20 or more, then you're guaranteed to have a trial over it. $20 doesn't sound like much today, but if you look at what $20 was worth during the 1700s, you're looking at around $500. So if your bicycle that costs only $100 is broken, no, you're probably not going to go to court over it because it's only $100. But if your brand new car is destroyed, which is several $1,000s, then yeah, you have the right to go to court over it. Eighth Amendment is the, let's say you've gone to trial, let's say you are found guilty, let's say the jury does decide to punish you. Well, even though we're going to punish you, we're not going to do it cruelly, we're not going to do it in some weird, unusual way. And so you have the freedom from cruel and unusual punishment. This picture here is someone being drawn into 4 pieces till their body is ripped into 4. We're not going to do that to you. All right. You have a lot of people today who argue that the death penalty is cruel and unusual punishment. During this time frame, though, when the people who wrote it, the way they were thinking, death penalty was not a cruel and unusual punishment. Is it? And that's up for you to decide. Ninth Amendment basically states that, you know what, there's only so many things we can write down. And if we didn't write it down, or, oh, dang it, we forgot it, guess what? You still have it. Okay? The Ninth Amendment states that citizens are still granted rights that may not have been listed in the U.S. Constitution. So it's kind of like protecting themselves, saying, all right, well, we didn't specifically say it, but you get that right anyway. That's the 9th one. 10th Amendment is going to come into bigger play when it comes into the Civil War era, because the 10th Amendment basically says that any power that we did not give to the federal government goes to the states. All right, so anything we didn't explicitly say in the Constitution, the state does it. All right? 10th Amendment is going to come into the big states' rights argument later on down the road. Okay, all of this Bill of Rights, all of this Constitution, all of this House of Representatives, all of this stuff is built upon 7 principles of government. Now, last year in 7th grade, you probably covered the 7 principles. We briefly covered it this year, so I'm going to really quickly run through the 7 principles for you, and we will call this one done. All right, one of the first principles is the idea of popular sovereignty. We've talked about this a lot, especially here in the 2nd semester. Popular sovereignty is the idea that the government doesn't control what I do, but the people control the government. And so because the people control the government, the people can tell the government what to do. How is popular sovereignty practiced today? Your ability to go vote. If you don't like the president, you go vote for someone differently. If you do like the president, you go vote for him again. It's popular sovereignty. Second principle here is the limited government. This is the idea that, once again, we're not going to let one person turn into a dictator. We're not going to let one person turn into this massive king-like figure, if you will. The government is only allowed to do what the Constitution allows. Nothing more, nothing less. All right, the separation of powers, once again, trying to avoid having a king-like figure. If we spread the power out to as many people as possible, if we spread this power to as many different branches as we possibly can, then we're not going to run the risk of having a king. So the separation of powers is this division into the 3 branches. We have the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. All right, and so even though we're spreading this power out among lots of different branches, lots of different people, we still want to have a check and we still want to have a balance. We still want to make sure that each branch is doing the right thing. We want to have accountability, if you will. The checks and balances keep one branch from abusing power by becoming the most important. One group is not more important than the other. They're all equal, and it prevents people from making knee-jerk decisions. Federalism. Okay, this is the division between the state and the federal government. We're going to split it. Okay, we're going to give some power to the states. We're going to give some power to the federal government. That's the idea behind federalism. The 6th principle is republicanism, and we're not talking about the Republican Party. Republicanism is the idea of republicanism assures that the people have the right to vote. Voting is one way that people stay sovereign, going back to the idea of popular sovereignty. Republicanism, voting. And then number 7, you do have rights as people. You have individual rights. We are not going to make decisions based on society necessarily. We're going to make decisions based on the people. The government should always protect people's individual rights. Going back to John Locke, unalienable rights. All right. Okay, so hopefully this made some sense to you. Like I said, there's a whole lot of information I just covered. If you are confused about anything, please ask me. Please ask me in class, email me, whatever you need to do, and I will help you out. If you need to rewatch the video, rewatch the video. If there's, like I said, if there's any questions, let me know, and I will see you guys later.